Hi, I'm Dr. Dan Ratner. Today I am joined by Harville and Helen Hendrix, the co-creators of Imago Relationship Therapy and co-founders of the Safe Conversations movement. They're also authors that have been featured by Oprah and experts in couples counseling, not only for others, but for themselves. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below. And finally, you can reserve your place in one of my seminars or purchase any of my mind-body guides, also known as the PDFs, at www.crushingdoubt.org. Check out our website for our latest promotions and opportunities, and note that we have our membership groups available now for sign-up. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with couples therapists Harville Hendrix and Helen Hunt-Hendrix. Harville and Helen, I am so honored that you're here with me and very excited to talk with you guys because we have a lot of overlap in the ways that we think, even though we do different types of work. So thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. We're honored to be invited.
Yes.
And look forward to the conversation.
So let's start with your work. You guys created a way of working with people. It's called Imago Relationship Therapy. And you also have been working on creating this way to make safe dialogue. You guys were telling me about this before. And I think this is so important to me and a way that I think we align very well. I am looking to expand what I do in the mind-body field so that it's a way that we think just in general, not just how we think when we come in the therapy room. And Helen, you were explaining some of that at the start about how you think about that. Talk to me about your work and how you're thinking about it in that way.
Okay. You want to go?
I think it should start with the origin, maybe go back to the very beginning. I was divorced, Harville was divorced, and he was speaking in different neighborhoods about stages of relationship. Mm-hmm. And it was fascinating. He would get up, some people, one of the first talks was in a garage, and people brought fold-out chairs, and there was a green chalkboard, and he went, guess what? People fall in love. Stage 1, the romantic phase. Oh, it feels great. But then he drew a line in the chalkboard. There's the power struggle. Everyone in the romantic phase of a relationship wakes up in the power struggle one day, and a lot of them divorce at that time. The good news is if you learn certain things, people can get to stage 3, which is real love. Well, I thought that was just amazing that someone would architect how relationships work. And so I proposed, and I was a great dialogue partner with him. And so anyway, this is all about you can control your relationship. People, if you learn certain things, everyone can have a better relationship. Imago therapy is the same thing as Safe Conversations, which was Harville's interest of getting it not just in therapy offices, but everywhere.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Harville.
Well, I was just going to pick up on the narrative that, given, as Helen said, when we met, we were both divorced, and we commented on that. And Helen had been divorced about a year. I'd been divorced about 2 years. And we didn't meet in order to date. We met at a party and discovered that we had met earlier, although I didn't know Helen had met me. She was in a class, a big class at SMU where I was a professor. And there were 2 doors in the room, and she would always go in the back door. So I never saw her. She never spoke to me, except at this party. She said, "Oh, I was in that class." So we discovered that she was. I always keep the best paper, and when I was a professor, I'd keep the best paper in the class, only one, and that was always the best. And it was one that I would learn something from, not something where somebody regurgitated stuff, but they actually thought beyond the material. That was a part of the class. And I said, you know what? I think I saved your paper. I think you wrote the best paper in my class. So I went to my office the next morning, went to my file cabinets, found it. It was there.
Oh my
Called her, said, "Hey, yeah, I did. You got the paper." And so that began a conversation that led us to where we are today. That was 45 years ago.
Yeah, it was a psychology class that he
Yeah.
was teaching, and I was
Yeah,
studying
on
psychology.
transactional analysis at the time. And as I was teaching that at SMU, so the work began with the question that we ask is, how come people get divorced? Which led to, well, obviously you get divorced because you're in conflict, and so why do people go into conflict? What is conflict all about? And then we moved the question. That became the research question that led to Getting the Love You Want, which is our book on couplehood that got published in 1988 and picked up by Oprah, so that all of a sudden the book was visible all over the world. But we also have expanded the question as to, why does anybody fight? Why is there conflict at all? Why do human beings, engage in this? Can't we live some other way? But we need to answer the question rather than judge it. So that's been our work, is to look at what is it that brings people into conflict, and how can they engage in difference without polarizing. So we found that dialogue worked and we evolved dialogue together. In fact, Helen sort of did the prototype of dialogue in one of the arguments. We've always argued, and we were, even before we were formally dating, we were into conversations that were rather challenging. And so Helen said one day when we were in her living room, and she said, "Stop! One of us talk and the other one listen." And so we were doing what we now call parallel monologue. You were both talking at the same time and nobody was listening. And that's what couples do, is they don't listen, they just talk. That calmed us down for some reason. That calmed us down. It's like we now talk about that. She did a prefrontal cortex message. Stop, one talk, the other talk. We did it, and it worked. So I took it to the clinic because I had a couples practice, and I'd been doing problem solving, conflict resolution, communication building, couples therapy, which doesn't work ultimately for couples. They needed something else. And so we turned couples to face each other and began to say, don't talk to me, talk to each other, and I'll help you do that. So we began to change the face of couples therapy by moving it away from them talking to me and me talking to them talking to each other and me helping them talk. So we did that, and we figured that works so well because it transforms couples almost immediately. And that we could take dialogue out of the clinic and insert it in the public domain, strip all the therapeutic complexity, and just put it in as a relational skill. And so that's the social safe conversation as a social action movement. So that's sort of in a nutshell what we've done for the past 40 years.
It's really amazing work, and I'm sure you've helped tremendously with so many people. But I wanted to highlight a couple of things that I see in what you're saying that really fit with my vision of things in a very important way. So first of all, the message you're sending is so hopeful. It is one that suggests, hey, yes, we can have conflict, but it can be overcome. Yep. It can be overcome if we stay connected, if we keep communicating. And in the work that I do, in large measure, this is funny, I hadn't thought about it this way, but in a way, it's like I'm dealing with a couple. I'm dealing with the person and their symptoms. And they're a couple. They don't, they're not seeing the symptoms as something that they can partner with and understand and bring into the conversation. But I love your hopefulness and the fact that there's room to create dialogue that can open up new space.
Yes.
In addition, one other thing just to say, and just an observation, is this idea of stages in people. I love that, because that's another hopeful thing. It's another thing where you're saying, hey, we're not just one way. We evolve. We grow. Yeah. So I wondered if you could talk more about that aspect of things as you see it. And let's start there. Go ahead.
Well, I'd like to make a comment about that, if it's okay with you. That what you just said, that's a polarity. We're just something, or we evolve. And those are two philosophical positions about human beings. And it's interesting to note that until the 1990s, we thought the brain was a fixed something in a black box that didn't change. And we thought the DNA sequencing was fixed, that it was deterministic. And nearly everything about human beings has been looked at like the atom was looked at by Newton, as everything is made of atoms, but this atom is unchangeable, uncuttable, and it interacts with other atoms but not connected to them. So there's no process going on. So what we've discovered since the 90s, that the brain actually changes every time you talk to somebody, because the brain is an experience-dependent organ. There's no such thing as a static brain. And we discovered the DNA sequencing is very much not fixed, for several 8 or 10 generations. DNA changes like the brain changes with experience. It's experience dependent as well. So what we're learning is that we are processes. We are not things. We are energy in motion. So therefore, change is happening all the time. And if you insert the right thing into the right intervention, and we would say in therapy, but let's use that word, you insert the right thing into the process amplifies even more positively. And we have a thing here on my desk. We are the inventors and sole creators of our universe. So what Helen and I are learning is that if you want, you can create the kind of relationship you want by the input you do into the relationship. Not the input your partner puts in, but the input you put in. So you no longer say, hey, why don't you change so we'll have a better relationship? The question is, how am I going to constellate a better relationship with you by what I put into that? So that is the hopeful thing, is that I can make a choice, I can be intentional, I can put in the right ingredients, and I can get an outcome that I can't even predict, but it'll be positive and better. And, that's rooted in the quantum field theory, where things are all potential until you decide what they are. Then you remove all the other potentials for that. And that came out of the double slit experiment, in which there's the thing is a particle or a wave until you look at it. And then it becomes a particle. And if you don't look at it, it's a wave. So how you interact with something determines what it is. So how I interact with you, how I interact with Helen constellates what's going to happen in that relationship. So it is a field of infinite possibility. And I think when you get that as a cognitive construct and get rid of, I'm stuck here, we're fixed here, we just have to, do the best we can without suffering, that I think we can actually talk about moving beyond conflict. I'm beginning to think, I don't think conflict is necessary.
Oh, I agree.
I think that there will always be difference, but difference can be either polarized or celebrated. And if we celebrate difference, then we get something, we get a third thing. That is the mixture of our two. But if we polarize with difference, we only get two things, and they and they become negative energy. And
oh my God!
Talking.
But that was great, and I loved every second of it for multiple reasons. I'll highlight again why. First of all, in my work with symptoms and with patients, I encourage them that we are what I call moment-to-moment beings.
Yes.
There's no static us.
Yeah.
We view ourselves as static. I'm always this way.
Yeah.
One thing I say to people sometimes is I'm like, well, but one of the reasons you're always this way is you always believe that's who you are.
Yeah.
If you change that, we can change. And that includes with chronic pain. We can change our belief about it. So I was excited to hear you say that, and I wasn't expecting to hear you say this, and I'm very excited about this. I have, my work is based on this phrase, crushing doubt, or at least that's a name that has come out of my work.
Yep.
And part of what that entails is that I always challenge assumptions. I'm not going to just accept something because it's regarded as generally true.
Yes.
I'm going to look at it. There are truths. There are things that I can't do. There are limitations to things. But a lot of times we're limiting ourselves in ways that we don't need to. And I think conflict is one of those areas. So much of the symptom work that I do comes from the aggression that we carry inside ourselves, but we don't know how to channel it correctly. And I think people feel like they're choosing between annihilate the aggression or have conflict. And they don't see that there's an in-between.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way to channel aggression in positive ways. That does not have to be antagonizing each other or at odds with each other.
Right.
So I completely agree with the idea that we can move to a place. I think we can move beyond conflict.
Yeah.
If there's anything I can do to help to do that, please let me know. But I think you guys are doing great work with that. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah. But and I think that you want to help. I think you
Just
preempted.
I think I'll just do a quick comment.
I was going to ask, yes.
That in our structured process of how we teach people to convert disconnected relationships into connected relationships, one of the practices is converting a frustration into a request. We are upset with someone, and and we can list something that they did and 10 reasons why it was stupid, and they said they wouldn't do it again, and they keep doing it, and we get frustrated that a person has done things we disapprove of.
Mm-hmm.
And we have good reason, and that attitude isn't going to result in a connected relationship. And if the person will identify what is the frustrating thing and what would solve it, and they make an appointment with the other person and ask for an appointment to share a behavior change request, that they wish they would change their behavior. And here's how it would feel good to the speaker if the person would change their behavior in a way that would have meaning to them. And the expression on the person's face, that's the speaker, we call it the sender, the look in that person's eye as they're making a behavior change request makes a huge difference. On the other person will go, who might go, oh, well, I haven't thought about it. Okay, let me give it some thought. And I think I could probably do something. We'll work something out. And so this is, we teach to people to handle problems in a way that increases the safety in the energy field between them, which increases the likelihood that the solutions will come.
It's beautiful. And actually what you just said, Helen, extends from what Harville was saying and then what I was saying about this moving beyond conflict, because you're giving the nuts and bolts of a way that we can actually do that.
It's a real concrete. But,
and that's part of what I do too. I get very concrete, because ultimately, isn't that what people are asking us? They're asking us how do I do it?
Yep.
I find that in many fields, and in my field as well, there's all kinds of well-meaning people. There's all kinds of people who are helping in lots of ways, but ultimately the same question keeps coming up: how?
Mm-hmm.
And your illustration of that, Helen, that you just gave is beautiful. I just wanted to reflect back what I'm seeing in it. That, first of all, the idea of making an appointment with someone, it's asking permission to have the communication instead of just barreling down the door and saying, I need this.
Yeah, it's respecting the other person's boundaries. And then once the person says, actually, this is a terrible time, how about in 2 hours? Or how about tonight? Or can we do that tomorrow? Then that person will give you their undivided attention, and they won't be multitasking.
But I want to give you even more credit than that in what you said, Helen, because not only are you respecting the boundaries of the other person, you're setting them up for success. You're giving them an opportunity to be a co-creator in this discussion. It's
beautiful.
Just beautiful.
Yes, it is, and that's true.
And this goes along, Harville, with what you were saying. That sets us up for a lack of conflict. I do this in my work all the time. Sometimes people come out of meetings and they're like, how did you... I'm not saying this to brag. I'm just saying to further the ideas that we're talking about here, because many people can do this. But I'll come out of meetings and people will say, how did you get them to talk about that so, without the conflict? And really, one of the reasons is I don't assume there's going to be conflict. I don't. Breaking past that assumption is so huge, and I'm so impressed that you guys did that. But now I want to jump back to your early days a little bit and ask you, how did you come to these ideas? Because it seems that the two of you are both a bit outside of the box thinkers, which I think is what's required for anything to move in a positive direction. Is this part of just who you are naturally? Was there a shift that happened? How'd you get there?
So I learned it all from Helen. She would come up with an idea, and this is half jest and half truth, as you can tell. But one of our processes as a couple from the beginning, like with that living room scene. So Helen comes up with that, and that's the kernel of the dialogue process. And we had not developed that. I mean, this was in 1977, and we didn't formalize the dialogue process until in the 1980s when we started doing research to write the book. But I experimented with it with couples. I took that. So I would she'd come up with something. She's an intuitive person. It's interesting. Sometimes I feel like I walk into Helen's world and I see the whole universe. You come into my world, you only see one planet. I'm a linear thinker, and I think about one thing at a time. But you go into Helen's world, everything is in there, and she knows what's in there and what's going on. And so once something does get clear to me, I can then turn it into a system and into a technique and into a process. I can take her intuition and turn it into an operation that works. And then for years, I would take it to the clinic, and we would take it to our workshops and test it with couples. And in fact, everything that we know about dialogue, we're taught by couples. Like, okay, so you want one person talk, one person listening. So what else do you want? Well, I remember one woman said, I would like to know, do I make sense? And her husband said, of course not. You don't make sense. That's what our problem is. You're kind of crazy. And she said, but I make sense to me. And I would like you to see that I make sense to me. You don't have to agree with me. So he said, oh, well, if I don't have to agree with you, of course I see how you're thinking. She said, that's what I want. I've never felt that you saw how I was thinking. I never thought about that either.
Yeah.
So I said, well, gosh, so he can validate you without agreeing with you. She said, yes, I don't need him to agree. I just need him to see.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sitting there as this clinician putting together systems saying, I got step number 2, mirroring we got down. That was pretty easy. Validation, pretty hard, because I have to say there are 2 worlds and they're both okay. So that's differentiation. So that ruptures the symbiotic consciousness that we were all in, which is you have to see it my way or take the highway. There's no other way. That's symbiosis, and that's a universal human disease. But when you can differentiate and say, you have a way, I have a way, they're both okay, then you can go into celebration of difference. Now you don't need conflict anymore, because conflict is a function of the collision of symbiotic consciousnesses, in which I see it my way, you see it your way, and therefore we're both, we just can't get along. We can't talk. Republicans can't talk to Democrats.
Right. This is so beautiful what you're saying, Harville, and in multiple ways. First of all, I love that you're recognizing the kinds of things that Helen can do, and the differences that she brings. There would be no
Imago without Helen. She's the mother of Imago. I don't know what I am. I'm the You're certainly the mother. Maybe I'm the father. I don't know. The fathers do structure, right? The mothers do the creative nurturing, and the fathers do structuring. But yeah, absolutely, there would be no imago and no safe conversations without
I
us.
was getting a master's in counseling psych at SMU when we met. So I was studying. So I was a great dialogue partner.
Yeah.
But you also are both people who, this is not surprising given what you do, but you're both very good at not only listening, but at taking what you hear and doing something with it. And I gravitate towards you both. I can see I have a little bit of Helen and a little bit of Harville in me, so maybe that's why what I do works. Because I have that intuitive sense, and I can see the big picture. I really do. But I found that this other part of me wasn't getting as much play when I was doing my therapy work. I guess I would say I was operating in the world more like Helen than Harville for a while. But I had this part of myself that really would be good at structuring things. You know, when I was growing up, I was very good at math.
Oh.
And like much more than any other thing. And I've said to people sometimes recently, it's really interesting how I actually use math in what I do, because I see relationships and I see how to build things. And so I've built a system similar to what I think you guys have built that really is a framework, and it is an evolving framework. I hear a question, I'm sure you guys do this too, I hear questions from other people and think, how do I incorporate that? What do I do about this? I take people's problems seriously. They bring them to me, no matter what they are. And I think, how do we work with that?
By the way, have you read any books on Pythagoras recently?
Not recently, no.
You remind me of Pythagoras.
Oh, wow.
He has.
That's
That's who I live with, somebody who reads Pythagoras.
He came up with the concept of the triangle.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the hypothesis is the sum of the two parts.
Oh, yeah, no, Pythagorean theorem.
Pythagorean, but then he was a musician, and
so am I.
Okay, there you go, a mathematician who's wonders about things.
Oh, well, that's exciting. Pythagoras is a person in history who I have admired, but to be compared to him is quite an honor.
Oh, you have to suck it up, take it in.
Oh, believe me, I will. This is something I've gotten good at. I mean, and you know, in all seriousness, I didn't used to be good at that. I like humility. There's certainly a place for it, and it's important, but it also is important that we nourish ourselves and we allow that nourishment to come in. So I'll soak that up for sure. Now, I want to move to back to something Harville was talking about kind of the source of conflict being that we're so rooted in our own viewpoint. So this interview came to be because of someone I work with, Jane Wilkins. I consider her a dear friend, not just somebody I work with. And she gave me this excerpt from your book, Giving the Love That Heals. It's a longer excerpt, so I'm actually not going to read the whole thing, but I just want to paraphrase it in a way that captures something that I've come to understand. It's very similar in the work that I do, which is we have to start with ourselves at that center of the universe. It's what we are as babies. We come in that way. But it becomes the source of conflict when we view us as right and the other person as wrong. And if I'm understanding the excerpt correctly, I'm understanding that what we can start to do is recognize there is intrinsic value in how that other person sees their world and their universe. And I'm imagining that's part of what this safe dialogue is about. How do we bring ourselves to the dialogue so we can actually discuss things?
Yeah.
It is amazing to me how much of the time we spend not really talking about something because we're actually all defending ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I just think you guys are doing this beautiful work, and it has overlap with something that I do. I don't know how familiar you are with my work, although it's interesting because I have 3 columns, very Pythagorean. So maybe there's something to that.
Yeah.
But in my work, I help people see that there are 3 different ways that they're relating to symptoms.
Three
One,
relating to what?
to symptoms.
To symptoms. Okay.
So one part of it is what I call them columns, because people do these mind-body maps where they write down what's happening in these different areas of their lives. Very systematized, very Harville. And the emotions column is how our feelings can lead to symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the doubt column is how our thoughts, our limiting thoughts, keep us in the same place. They keep us from being the moment-to-moment beings and changing, and they keep us from seeing the potential that we have. I was thinking about how everything is potential, like you said, Harville. But then there's this third column that I came across, and it was more after I had healed from 8 years of back pain. I had 8 years of back pain. I was getting no answers. Things weren't making sense. But some part of me was driving towards, it must make sense somehow. I was challenging that assumption. And I got to this idea of the power column. And that is where I think that we get to a place where we can achieve real self-love. And I was thinking about that in relation to the work you've talked about. Because we start off as couples, and what you're talking about, as we have that, the love phase, whatever we want to, the initial love phase. And then we get into the power struggle. Well, the power column is really about the power struggle that we have with our symptoms, with the world, and with ourselves. And I come from the assumption that all of that conflict can be resolved. So I'm just curious what you think about that. A totally different perspective, because it's coming at it from the symptoms perspective. But it just sounds so in line with what you guys talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what you think about that.
You want to go?
When dialogue was beginning, and we were talking about things like converting a frustration to a request, for some reason, I visualize people's brains. The lower brain, reactive, they defend themselves, and cortisol and adrenaline is released because they're scared that the other person might be right and they're wrong, and they're going to stand up for themselves. But it's a toxic neurochemical. So the one thing we talk about when we talk about relationships to anybody, kids, adults, whatever, is learn a little bit about brain science. Because if you have thoughts and words that come from the neocortex, it releases completely different neurochemicals. And one of the things that has transformed neuroplasticity, you can change your brain by the thoughts you run through them. And I've had a changed brain the last 12 years because I started wondering about Harville. And I was sort of driving him crazy because I was always trying to improve him. I figured out things he should do better, and he was lucky to have me in his life, right? Not. He didn't want any more good advice. I had given him some good advice in the past, and things launched. And it was fun for me to stop being. Well, I love crushing doubt. Don't doubt anything. Why doubt something? You've already labeled it as a failure. You need to wonder about it. So that's my one additive. There's a part of the brain, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, that the neuroscientists call the Dalai Lama state. The left brain hemisphere is logical thinking. The right brain hemisphere is connect the dots thinking. And then between the two, a lot of people haven't studied this part of the brain where you not know, you wonder. And don't label something as doubt. Stamp it, crush it, get it out of your life. That's living with potential failures all the time. Don't doubt.
I think it's beautifully said, and I'll just add to that, Helen. I think that being in a not knowing state can be incredibly useful. And then there are also times where we can be very definitive, and we just don't have to wonder. It's another form of crushing doubt, where you like we know, I mean, you guys work with trauma, so do I.
Mhm.
And a big part of that is what you said, Helen, the changes in the body
Mhm.
that happen. I mean, I say this to people all the time. Your brain doesn't really know the difference between being chased by a lion and being attacked psychologically in a way that wounds our soul. There's no difference.
It does not know the difference. You're
Yeah.
right.
No. And our whole bodies change with that. And so when we work with trauma, we have to get to places, I find that we have to get to places where we can, not know certain things, and that's okay.
But know
But-
certain things. You're right.
Exactly.
You're
with
right.
complete certainty.
Yes. We have a relative who goes through life, faith, hope, love. That's it. Anything that comes up, have faith, have hope, try to have love. And that's what this guy lives by, and his life is magical and happy, and everyone around him is happy. So you're right. Have the koans, pick koans where you think of something very specifically about what you want to get you through.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
know.
the
That's
way I think about it, and this fits with what you guys are saying, is, we have that oneness. We have that part of ourselves that's just us, and that's our natural inclination initially to go into the universe like that and try to get people to see that. But that does not have to run counter to what happens with everybody else if we can know our truth. In what I call the power column, I have something called the core narrative, where people connect to who are they? Who are they? Their identity and their suffering self. What has happened to them? And then what can they do about it that's different? And having that certainty about it is incredibly important. We are awash in doubt, and society makes us doubt things. And I think a lot of society foments conflict where we don't need it.
So let me see if I can mirror something I think I'm picking up in your system, especially in the third column. And this is not quite what you said, but it's what I am making up that you said. I'm making this up out of what you said.
Well, it may be what I was saying. So let's hear it.
And that is that, if I'm hearing it, the couple that we work with is, of course, the other person, but your work with a couple, which is the self and the symptom. And the symptom is a function of the self, and the self is a function of the symptom. There's a dialectic between the two.
Yep.
So the symptom is, in some sense, a statement about the self, about something. Something is amiss.
Yeah, not aligned.
Not aligned. Okay. So if I got that straight, I think I lost my sentence. But if I got that, because it's a beautiful thing that our culture. Yeah. Here's what it was. And you put the word self-love in there, is that there's something mitigating in terms of healing about achieving self-love. And to do that, you need to know who you really are. That is, you're a creature of the universe you didn't choose to be here, but you're valuable because you are here. But something about our culture, and I think this is where I wanted to get, something about our culture makes us not okay as species. It's been around a long time that we are not okay. Then we have to become okay. And then if we become okay, then something good will happen to us. But if we don't, then we're going to suffer the consequences. It's kind of permeated the culture for the last 2,500 years. Human beings are not all right. And so we start off sort of like Augustine said, that in sin did your mother conceive you. Wow, I didn't even get a choice.
Right.
To do that. So I think I'm hearing you saying that what has to happen is that we have to become okay with ourselves. And
Yes.
somehow the symptom is an indicator of the degree of not okayness that we live in. And the symptom is a rebellion against that in some sense.
Exactly. Oh, that's so beautiful that you could see that. Yes, the symptom I think, is a communication with ourselves.
Yes.
To be who we are, to value who we are, and be. I say this all the time. The body is the most empathic entity we have. It will not put up with the slightest variance against ourselves. It doesn't like when we go against ourselves.
No, right. Like you don't sleep enough, you don't take care of yourself, you don't think of yourself as a good person. The body suffers all that. It says no, and it
objects.
And you're going to die 13 years earlier if you keep up that thing, and your telomeres are not going to grow, and so your brain is not going to be I mean, it's just really the body really is a protester.
It is, and conflict is not only not inevitable with other people; it's also not inevitable with ourselves.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, guys, this has been so much fun. I feel like I could talk to you forever, and I hope that we will keep in touch and we will talk further. If you're open to coming on again, I would love to continue these conversations.
We'd love to. Yeah, I think this has been one of the most sort of out of the box creative conversations because we do, as Helen said, at least a couple of interviews a week, but this is push. Your work pulls us. To look at our work in that relationship and to think about it in new ways. And I love getting the image that the symptom is a message from the body to the self, that you need to shape up in some way. That is to become self-accepting and self-loving instead of self-judging.
Well, guys, this is beautiful, and I feel the same way. That you guys, I learned things from this, and these are the conversations that I love so much. They're expansive, and I like to be around people who challenge assumptions and know maybe we can do something even better than anyone ever thought if we're starting to think outside of the box. So I think there's more conversations to come here. That's certainly my hope.
We would love it. I think that's why we are still alive and well at our age, is that we've challenged every assumption we were taught. And finally said, well, we'll build our own intellectual system and test it out. So we have people in 67 countries practicing imago and reading our books and all that. So, so we get feedback, but we don't settle with the feedback. We keep pushing the system, because I think the creative process is interminable.
Yeah.
And so forth.
And I just want to say I learned things from you.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I did too. Thank you.
Well, thank you both. And I think creativity is life. And I love that you guys are continuing to grow. And we will have more conversations ahead.
Let's talk again. Thank you.
That sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I'm just blown away by these two for multiple reasons. But it really is funny. When you talk to somebody like when I talk to Harville and Helen, people like that, I feel like I'm not talking to myself exactly, but I feel like I'm talking to people who are in a very similar place to me. My system is expansive, it is growing, it's asking questions, it's challenging assumptions. And one thing I love about these two, aside from their openness with each other and the things that they build together, is that they do challenge some big assumptions. One of the moments I was completely blown away by was this idea that Harville said that I think we can move beyond conflict. And it's something that I agree with. I don't hear a lot of people say these kinds of things. But the way that we get past these things is to challenge ourselves to do that. Now, in the meantime, Harville used this great part of Helen to learn. And Helen brings to the table so many things, but one of the things that she brought to the table is this idea that you can change the communication. A very nuts and bolts kind of thing. So this was another thing that I loved in this interview, is the how-to of it. We got to some of that, and we're clearly dealing with thinkers who are willing to get into the nuts and bolts. And how do you do it? There are actually things we can do to change our relationship with others, or to change our relationship with ourselves, or with our symptoms. And this interview was a thrill for me in that regard. So I'm very grateful they came on. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below, and we'll get back to you personally.